Sparky here, ready to fetch the key points. Welcome to the Guardians of the Coast, understanding Belize's wetland and mangrove ecosystems. Let's make this short and sweet.
Belize is a small tropical country nestled at the heart of Central America and the Caribbean, defined by a geography that is deeply intertwined with water. Because much of the country sits at or even below sea level, its coastline is a complex mosaic of aquatic ecosystems. If you were to travel from the eastern shores toward the interior, you would witness a fascinating transition in the landscape. It begins at the edge of the sea with dense clusters of mangrove forests and winding lagoons. Moving further inland, these coastal swamps gradually give way to open, grassy savannas, which eventually transition into the towering tropical hardwood forests of the higher elevations.
This gradient creates a diverse range of habitats that are essential to the country's environmental health. Wetlands are a dominant feature of this landscape, covering roughly 30% of Belize's land surface, a figure that can swell to 40% during the rainy season as the terrain captures runoff from the mountains. The defining characteristic of these areas is the soil, which often contains a layer of impermeable clay. This clay prevents water from seeping deep into the ground, causing it to collect in stagnant pools, lagoons, and marshes. While some might view these waterlogged areas as unproductive swamplands, they are actually high biodiversity zones that function as the country's natural filtration system. Within these wetlands, you find specialized environments like gallery forests. These are lush strips of vegetation that grow along the edges of rivers and streams that never run dry. Because they benefit from a continuous influx of nutrients and a year-round water supply, gallery forests are often taller and more vibrant than the surrounding bush. They play a critical role in flood control, acting as natural spillways that move water safely through the landscape. As water travels through these systems, the vegetation and soil trap sediments and pollutants. This is a vital service, as it ensures that the water reaching the ocean is clear and nutrient-balanced, protecting the delicate coral reefs offshore from being smothered by runoff. Furthermore, these ecosystems serve as a powerful carbon sink. The waterlogged anaerobic soils of the coastal swamps store massive amounts of organic matter, sequestering more carbon per hectare than many terrestrial forests. Despite their importance, these areas face constant pressure from urban sprawl and coastal development. In places like Belize City, much of the original mangrove cover has been removed to make way for residential areas, yet small clusters remain as a testament to the original landscape. By understanding this transition from the salty coast to the freshwater interior, we recognize these ecosystems not as eyesores, but as the essential guardians of the coast that sustain both marine and terrestrial life. In the coastal landscape of Belize, you will find three primary species of mangroves, easily categorized by their colors: red, black, and white. Each has evolved distinct physical characteristics to handle the harsh, salty environment of the shoreline and avoid competition through a natural pattern of zonation. The red mangrove, or Rhizophora mangle, is likely the most iconic tree you will encounter. It is the pioneer of the group, growing furthest out into the sea and standing tall in the deepest water. You can spot it instantly by its massive prop roots that arch out from the trunk like giant spider legs. These roots provide stability against crashing waves and serve as a vital breathing apparatus. If you look closely at the bark of these roots, you will see small textured bumps called lenticels. These tiny pores allow the tree to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide, while also helping to expel excess salt. The name red comes from the vibrant, rusty red hue found just beneath its bark. Its leaves are thick, leathery, and dark green, often turning bright yellow before they drop, a process that helps the tree shed even more salt and return nutrients to the surrounding ecosystem. Moving slightly inland to where the water is shallower, you will encounter the black mangrove, known scientifically as Avicennia germinans. Unlike the spidery red mangrove, the black mangrove looks more like a traditional hardwood tree with a thick trunk and dark fissured bark. To identify it, you should look down at the ground around its perimeter. You will see hundreds of thin, pencil-like spikes sticking straight up out of the mud. These are numidifores, or specialized aerial peg roots. Because the swampy soil is anaerobic, meaning it lacks oxygen, these roots act like snorkels, allowing the tree to breathe even when the ground is waterlogged. Another key identifier is the foliage. While the tops of the leaves are a standard green, the undersides have a distinct silvery white sheen. This species is famous for excreting salt directly through its leaves, which can sometimes be seen as sparkling crystals on the surface. Finally, located furthest upland, where tidal flooding is less frequent, is the white mangrove, or Laguncularia racemosa. This species often takes the form of a small shrub and is identifiable by its smooth, oval-shaped leaves that feature a unique dimpled or notched apex.
If you look at the base of the leaf where it meets the red stem, or petiole, you will find two small raised bumps, or glands. These nectaries are used to release excess salts and sugars. The trunk of the white mangrove is also distinctive, often covered in large white scales that give it its name. By recognizing these specific root structures, leaf shapes, and salt management strategies, you can easily distinguish the three guardians that protect the Belizean coast.
While the red, black, and white mangroves are the true stars of the coastal ecosystem, they are joined by a supporting cast known as mangrove associates. Understanding the difference between a true mangrove and an associate is key to grasping how Belize's coastline is organized. True mangroves possess specialized physiological adaptations, like the ability to excrete salt through their leaves or breathe through complex root systems in waterlogged soil. Associates, on the other hand, are plants that can tolerate some salt and thrive in coastal environments, but lack the more extreme biological tools of the true mangroves. They usually occupy the transition zone, where the wetland begins to turn into dryland. One of the most common associates you will encounter in Belize is the buttonwood, scientifically known as Conocarpus erectus. You might hear locals refer to it as the gray mangrove, but it is not a true mangrove species. The buttonwood is typically a multi-truncated shrub or tree that grows further upland, often right alongside the white mangrove. You can easily identify it by its unique button-like flowers and fruits that cluster at the tips of its branches. Because it is incredibly hardy and can withstand salt spray and wind, it has become a favorite for seaside landscaping. If you walk through a coastal resort or a park in Belize City, you will likely see buttonwood hedges. Beyond aesthetics, the buttonwood plays a vital role in land reclamation. Its sturdy root system helps stabilize the soil at the edge of the wetlands, preventing the ground from washing away and helping to slowly transition swampy areas into solid, usable land. Another frequent sight along the coast is the Australian pine, or Casuarina equicifolia.
Despite its name and its appearance, it is not a true pine tree at all, nor is it a wetland species in the traditional sense. It is a mangrove associate that has found a niche in slightly saline soils where other terrestrial trees might struggle to survive. This allows it to escape the intense competition of the dense hardwood forests further inland. You might know it as the whistling pine because of the soft, haunting sound the wind makes as it passes through its thin, needle-like structures. Interestingly, those needles aren't actually leaves. They are specialized green stems, while the true leaves are reduced to microscopic scales to help the tree conserve water.
In Belize, these trees often form a thin line at the highest point of the beach, providing shade and acting as a final windbreak before the forest begins. The distribution of these species follows a very specific pattern called zonation, which is driven by a plant's ability to handle salt and water. The red mangrove sits furthest out in the deep water, followed by the black mangrove in the intertidal zone, and then the white mangrove further back. The buttonwood and Australian pine sit at the very end of this sequence, furthest upland. By occupying this high ground boundary, these associates act as a final buffer, reinforcing the work of the true mangroves in protecting the coastline from erosion and providing a vital habitat for birds and small mammals that prefer slightly drier feet. Together, they form a complete graduated defense system that shields the mainland from the power of the Caribbean Sea.
The coastal edge is one of the most demanding environments on Earth for any form of plant life. To survive here, mangroves have had to develop a suite of specialized biological tools that allow them to thrive where most other trees would quickly wither and die. The two primary challenges they face are high salinity and a total lack of oxygen in the waterlogged soil. Because these trees live in the intertidal zone, their roots are often submerged in thick, anaerobic mud that is essentially suffocating. To overcome this, mangroves have evolved some of the most recognizable root systems in the natural world. The red mangrove is perhaps the most iconic example, easily identified by its sprawling prop roots. These roots arch out from the main trunk like giant spider legs, providing the tree with much-needed stability in the soft, shifting sediments of the shoreline. But these roots do far more than just hold the tree upright. If you look closely at the bark of a red mangrove prop root, you will notice thousands of small raised bumps. These are called lenticels. These tiny pores act as gateways for gas exchange, allowing the tree to take in oxygen directly from the atmosphere and transport it down to the submerged parts of the plant. Without these lenticels, the root system would drown in the oxygen-depleted mud. Furthermore, red mangroves often send down aerial roots from their upper branches. These roots dangle in the air, eventually splitting into networks of 2, 3, or 4 separate segments before they touch the ground. At the very end of these reaching roots is a sensitive black tip that can actually sense when it has made contact with the soil, signaling the plant to begin establishing a new support structure. Moving slightly further inland, the black mangrove employs a different but equally fascinating strategy. Instead of large arching props, it produces thousands of specialized vertical roots known as pneumatophores. These look like small wooden pegs or snorkels sticking straight up out of the mud around the base of the tree. Because the soil in these swamps is saturated with water and rich in anaerobic bacteria that produce a distinct rotten egg smell of hydrogen sulfide, the black mangrove cannot get oxygen from the ground. The pneumatophores allow the tree to breathe by capturing air during low tide, ensuring the root system stays alive even when the surrounding environment is completely devoid of oxygen. The white mangrove also possesses these pneumatophores, though they are often much shorter or stunted, because the white mangrove typically grows further upland where tidal flooding is less frequent and the soil is slightly more stable. Beyond breathing, mangroves have mastered the art of salt management. The red mangrove uses its root system as a primary filter, blocking a massive percentage of salt from ever entering its vascular system. In contrast, the black and white mangroves allow salt into their systems, but have evolved specialized salt glands on their leaves to expel it. If you were to lick the leaf of a black mangrove, you would find it incredibly salty because the tree is actively pumping excess minerals out through its pores. They also utilize waxy, leathery leaves to prevent water loss in the heat of the tropical sun. Through these remarkable structural and chemical adaptations, mangroves transform a hostile, salty wasteland into a thriving, productive forest. The ground beneath a mangrove forest might look like stagnant, uninviting mud, but it is actually the site of some of the most complex and vital biogeochemical cycles on the planet. This dark, waterlogged soil is incredibly rich in organic matter, often referred to as detritus, which consists of fallen leaves, twigs, and other decaying biological material. Because the soil is permanently saturated with water, it creates an anoxic environment, meaning it is almost entirely lacking in oxygen. This is where specialized anaerobic bacteria take center stage. Since there is no oxygen to fuel traditional decomposition, these bacteria have adapted to use sulfur for their life processes. As they break down organic material in the absence of air, they release hydrogen sulfide gas as a byproduct. This is the source of that distinct, pungent, rotten egg odor, often associated with Belizean mangrove swamps. While visitors might find the smell off-putting, it is actually evidence of a highly active and efficient nutrient recycling system at work. One of the most critical roles of this unique cycle is carbon sequestration. Mangroves are among the most effective carbon sinks in the world, capable of storing significantly more carbon per hectare than most terrestrial tropical forests. They achieve this by pulling carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it in their living biomass, their leaves, branches, and trunks. But the real magic happens underground. Because the decomposition process in these waterlogged anaerobic soils is so slow,
carbon can remain trapped in the peat and mud for centuries rather than being released back into the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas.
This ability to lock away carbon makes Belize's mangrove forests a frontline defense against global climate change. The cycle is also about transformation and the export of energy. The organic detritus that falls from the trees is colonized by microscopic algae and bacteria known as microflora. These decomposers actually increase the nutritional value of the fallen material as they break it down. For instance, a single mangrove leaf, as it begins to decay, can reach a protein content of about 4. This nutrient-rich material becomes a primary food source for a vast array of organisms, including shrimp, crabs, and juvenile fish. Furthermore, energy converters like phytoplankton in the surrounding waters help process these nutrients, ensuring that the wealth of the swamp is shared with the adjacent seagrass beds and coral reefs. By consuming high amounts of nitrates and other minerals, the mangroves act as a natural filter, preventing the nutrient overload that could otherwise lead to harmful algal blooms or eutrophication in the open sea. Through this intricate dance of bacteria, gas, and sediment, the mangrove ecosystem sustains itself while providing a global service in carbon management and water purification. Mangroves are far more than just trees growing in the mud. They are nature's most effective coastal engineers. In a country like Belize, where much of the land sits at or below sea level, these forests serve as a vital living seawall that protects both urban centers and rural coastlines. The most iconic contributor to this defense is the red mangrove. Its complex network of prop roots acts like a giant underwater net. As tides come in and waves crash against the shore, this tangled web of wood absorbs and dissipates the energy of the water. Without this natural buffer, the constant action of the Caribbean Sea would quickly strip away the shoreline, leading to devastating coastal erosion. These roots do not just hold the line, they actually help build the land. By trapping sand, soil, and organic debris within their structure, mangroves stabilize the seabed and can even facilitate the formation of new islands over long periods of time. During extreme weather events, which are a recurring reality in the Caribbean, the protective role of mangroves becomes a matter of safety for inland communities. When hurricanes or tropical storms bring massive storm surges, the dense thicket of the mangrove forest acts as a physical barrier. The trees break the force of heavy waves and significantly reduce the velocity of high winds before they can reach residential areas. Much of the structural damage from a hurricane's initial impact is often absorbed by the mangroves, sparing the infrastructure behind them. This is why preserving the last remaining urban mangrove clusters, like the one found on the SJC campus in Belize, is so critical for city planning and disaster mitigation. Beyond acting as a physical shield, mangroves are master chemists. They function as a terrestrial filtration system, cleaning the water that flows from the land out toward the sea. In urban environments, rainwater runoff often carries a heavy load of pollutants, including garbage and liquid waste. As this water moves through the mangrove swamp, the slow-moving current allows sediments to settle among the roots, while the plants themselves go to work on the nutrients. Specifically, mangroves are known to consume high amounts of nitrates.
This is a crucial service because an excess of nitrates in the ocean can lead to a process called eutrophication, where massive algae blooms deplete oxygen levels and kill off marine life. By acting as a nutrient sink, mangroves ensure that the water reaching Belize's barrier reef is clear and balanced. This filtration is essential for the survival of coral reefs, which would otherwise be smothered by sediment or poisoned by runoff. Furthermore, the wetlands act as a reservoir, holding significantly more water during the rainy season, which prevents inland flooding and manages the flow of water back into the marine ecosystem.
To understand the true power of Belize's coastline, we have to look at the incredible partnership between three distinct ecosystems: the mangroves, the seagrass beds, and the coral reefs. These three do not just exist side by side, they function as a single, integrated life support system. Think of the mangroves as the first line of defense and the ultimate filtration plant. As water flows from inland savannas toward the Caribbean Sea, It carries sediments and pollutants, like nitrates. Without the mangroves acting as a giant biological net, these materials would flow directly onto the coral reefs.
Corals are living animals that are extremely sensitive to their environment. They need clear water to breathe and to allow light to reach the symbiotic algae that help them produce food. By trapping silt and consuming excess nutrients, mangroves ensure that the water reaching the Belize Barrier Reef is crystal clear and healthy. Just beyond the mangroves, we find the seagrass communities. These underwater meadows act as a secondary buffer, further stabilizing the seabed and improving water quality. They benefit significantly from the reduced floating sediments provided by the landward mangroves.
This leads into the most vital role this trio plays, serving as a critical nursery for marine life. The tangled, complex network of red mangrove prop roots creates a sanctuary that is nearly impenetrable for larger predators. For juvenile fish, shrimp, crabs, and lobsters, these roots are an essential hideout. Here, the young organisms can feed on the abundant detritus and organic matter trapped in the roots and relative safety. As these marine organisms grow and become more resilient, they gradually venture out from the protection of the roots into the seagrass beds, and eventually they move to the coral reef as adults to complete their life cycles. This migration is the primary reason why Belize's fisheries and tourism industries are so vibrant and productive. The health of the reef is directly tied to the safety provided by the mangrove roots. When you see a large snapper or a lobster on the reef, you are looking at an animal that likely spent its most vulnerable days tucked away in a coastal swamp. This interconnectedness means that the survival of one habitat is dependent on the others. The mangroves export the organic richness and nutrients that fuel the coastal food web, while the reef provides the physical barrier that protects the mangroves and seagrass from being destroyed by heavy wave action and storm surges.
It is a perfect circle of biological cooperation that sustains the incredible biodiversity of Belize's territorial waters.
In the world of botany, most trees follow a standard routine. They produce seeds, drop them to the ground, and hope that the soil and weather provide the right conditions for life to begin. However, the mangroves of Belize have developed a much more sophisticated and frankly fascinating strategy known as vivipary. In the animal kingdom, viviparous refers to species that give birth to live young rather than laying eggs. Mangroves do something remarkably similar. Instead of releasing dormant seeds, they produce what are called propagules.
These are essentially live seedlings that have already begun the germination process while still physically attached to the parent tree. This head start is a vital adaptation for surviving in the harsh, salty, and oxygen-poor environments of the coastal swamp. The most iconic example of this strategy is found in the red mangrove. If you look closely at the branches of a red mangrove, you will see long, green, pencil-like structures hanging down. These are the propagules. While they are still hanging from the branch, they are absorbing water and nutrients from the parent tree, growing several inches long and developing a heavy, pointed tip at the bottom. When they finally reach maturity and detach, they use a dual-purpose dispersal method. If a propagule falls during low tide, its spear-like shape and weighted end allow it to drop straight into the soft mud like a dart. It can immediately begin to grow roots, anchoring itself before the next tide can wash it away. If the propagule falls into the water during high tide, it utilizes its second trick, buoyancy. All mangrove propagules are designed to float, allowing them to be carried by tides and currents to new locations.
A red mangrove propagule can float for a long time, sometimes traveling hundreds of miles across the ocean. Interestingly, they often float horizontally while they are traveling. As they mature in the water and the internal chemistry shifts, they begin to float vertically, with the root end pointing down. This position makes it much more likely that they will snag on a shallow sandbar or a muddy bank, where they can quickly take root and begin forming a new colony. The black and white mangroves utilize this same viviparous strategy, but with different shapes.
Their propagules are much smaller, often looking like large lima beans or small teardrops rather than long pencils. Despite their smaller size, they are equally hardy, designed to drift on the water's surface until they find a suitable patch of higher ground to settle on. This contrasts sharply with mangrove associates like the buttonwood.
Because the buttonwood grows further inland, where the soil is more stable and less saline, it doesn't need the same level of preparation. Its seeds ripen on the plant until they burst and are dispersed by wind or settling, germinating in the air or soil, much like a traditional land plant.
By giving their offspring such a significant head start, mangroves ensure that the next generation is ready to withstand the constant movement of the sea from the very moment they land. This unique reproductive cycle is why mangroves are such successful pioneer species, capable of colonizing remote islands and shifting coastlines where other trees simply could not survive. This investment in the early development of their young is a cornerstone of their resilience, allowing them to remain the steadfast guardians of the Belizean coast.
Despite their incredible resilience and the vital services they provide, Belize's mangrove forests face a mounting series of threats that challenge their survival. Globally, we have already lost more than 50% of the original mangrove cover, and the remaining clusters in Belize are under constant pressure from both human activity and the changing climate. One of the most significant drivers of this loss is coastal development. As the demand for scenic residential areas and pristine tourist beaches grows, these forests are often viewed as mere swampland or an eyesore that harbors pests. Consequently, they are frequently cleared to make way for urban sprawl, luxury resorts, and vacation homes. This creates a dangerous irony where the very trees that protect coastal property from erosion are removed to enhance the view, leaving the land vulnerable to the sea. Beyond physical clearing for construction, aquaculture has historically taken a heavy toll on these ecosystems. In Belize, shrimp farming in particular has led to the conversion of large swaths of mangrove habitats into artificial ponds.
While these industries provide economic benefits, the environmental cost is high, as the removal of mangroves disrupts the natural filtration system of the coast. Furthermore, these trees are often harvested locally for fuel wood and charcoal, providing a source of energy, but further thinning the protective buffer along the shore. We also have to consider the impact of pollution. In urban areas like Belize City, mangroves act as a final terrestrial filter for trash and liquid pollutants. The increasing use of disposable plastics and chemical runoff puts an immense strain on these habitats.
While mangroves are experts at trapping sediments and filtering nitrates, there is a limit to what they can absorb before the ecosystem begins to degrade, which in turn threatens the health of the adjacent seagrass beds and coral reefs. Natural disasters present another major challenge. Being located in a hurricane-prone region, Belize's coast is frequently battered by high winds and massive storm surges. While mangroves serve as our first line of defense, breaking the force of heavy waves and reducing wind damage to inland areas, they are not invincible. A powerful hurricane can snap trunks and strip leaves, and while these forests are pioneer species capable of colonizing and regrowing, the increased frequency and intensity of storms driven by climate change make recovery much harder. Fortunately, there has been a significant shift in how these guardians are viewed. Since 1989, all mangroves in Belize have been granted legal protection, and the government now actively encourages development on higher ground away from sensitive wetland areas. Awareness is growing that these are not wastelands, but essential infrastructure. By understanding these threats, from the expansion of shrimp farms to the impact of urban pollution, we can better appreciate the urgent need for the conservation efforts and reforestation projects that are currently working to ensure these coastal forests remain standing for generations to come.
As we look at the future of Belize's coastlines, it is impossible to ignore the vital role that conservation and legal protection play in maintaining these delicate ecosystems. For a long time, mangroves and wetlands were dismissed as mere swamplands, smelly, insect-ridden wastelands that stood in the way of progress. However, this perception is shifting as we recognize them as the guardians of the coast. One of the most remarkable examples of this coexistence can be found right within the urban limits of Belize City.
On the St. John's College campus, a small but flourishing cluster of dense mangrove forest remains. This urban sanctuary serves as a powerful reminder that these ecosystems are not just remote wilderness areas. They are critical habitats that can thrive even alongside human development if they are respected and preserved. This specific urban forest is a haven for biodiversity, particularly for avian life. It serves as a vital pit stop for over 100 identified species of birds. When you walk through these wetlands, you might spot the mangrove warbler, easily identified by the male's distinctive rusty brown cap.
The dense canopy and root systems provide the perfect hunting and nesting grounds for a variety of kingfishers, including the belted, green, and ringed species. Wading birds are also abundant here. You might see the elegant silhouette of a tricolored heron, the hunched profile of a black-crowned night heron, or the vibrant pink plumage of a rosated spoonbill filtering through the shallow waters. The diversity is truly staggering, ranging from the curved-billed white ibis to the soaring, magnificent frigate bird, which often circles above, waiting to snatch a meal.
For those interested in documenting this life, tools like the eBird and Merlin apps have become essential for local conservationists and students to track and protect these populations. The survival of these habitats is not left to chance. Since 1989, all mangroves in Belize have been granted legal protection by the government. Recognizing the catastrophic impact of deforestation, which has claimed more than half of the world's original mangrove cover, Belizean authorities now actively encourage development on higher ground, away from these sensitive coastal fringes.
This legal framework is supported by the tireless work of NGOs and local communities who have seen significant success in reforesting degraded areas. These reforestation projects do more than just plant trees. They restore the nursery grounds for the shrimp, lobster, and fish that drive the nation's economy. By protecting the wetlands, Belize is securing its food sources, its storm defenses, and its natural heritage. These areas, once viewed as IFORs, are now celebrated as rich, nutrient-dense reservoirs of life.
Ensuring their survival means ensuring a resilient future for both the rural coastlines and the bustling urban centers of Belize.